Welcome back. Teachers in Denver set to strike on Monday. That if their pay demands are not met. Now, teachers in LA recently ended a strike, and it was largely over the very same issue, pay. But teachers are also fighting over things like classroom size, school funding, and a host of other issues. Plus, my next guest says the administration in Washington is actually making life even harder for the people on the front lines that are teaching our kids. And joining me now, American Federations of Teachers President Randi Weingarten. Obviously, the teachers in LA that striked are doing better, but it seems to be not a canary in a coal mine. It's not just an LA issue. I know all the issues aren't even resolved there, but we're hearing talk in Denver and other major cities of possible work stoppages. What's driving this? We've heard about overcrowded classrooms, not enough materials for the kids to be security issues. Give an idea, take us behind the doors here, some of these school districts. What's going on?
So let me give you one factoid that explains a lot of this. That 25 states spend less on public education today than they did before the 2008 recession. And 41 states spend less on higher education than they did before the 2008 recession. And that's with a country that between the last literally 5 years has had the best economic results in probably a generation. So you're seeing choices that were made not in the best interest of kids. And what teachers are saying in LA, it was 40 years of austerity from, frankly, tax caps like the one that Governor Cuomo wants to do in terms of New York State, where less and less funds actually go to support children. So you see kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts, fewer guidance counselors, fewer nurses, fewer librarians, class sizes that start inching up, lack of wraparound services like mental health services for kids. And so what's happening is that teachers throughout the country are standing in as the champions of their kids because teacher working conditions and kids' learning conditions are basically the same. So it's not just about reducing the amount of testing. It is about what are the conditions that we have to ensure that we can actually strengthen education outcomes for our kids.
Is this a red and a blue state thing? I know people may remember what happened in West Virginia. We saw in Kentucky. We saw where I think it was also in Oklahoma and a bunch of other states where education funding had been cut to the bone. But we were just talking about LA, and that's certainly not going to be confused with a red state.
Right. So, part of what has happened in LA is that you had Proposition 13 about 40 years ago, which was the Jarvis tax cap, and that slowly it eroded the conditions of teaching and learning in schools throughout California. Now, Jerry Brown started turning that around, but at the same time, you saw the charter schools, not the way they were initially thought of as mom and pop incubator models, but a separate kind of system of unregulated, sometimes for-profit charter schools developed that became a competitive system in LA, like, frankly, in Albany, like, frankly, in Detroit. And so that started hugely siphoning off money that was needed in neighborhood public schools. And it created a terrible devastation of resources.
Obviously, you represent more than 1,700,000 teachers. Give an idea. I mean, you must see for yourself and also hear stories. What's it like teaching in a class with 50 kids, with textbooks more than 10 years old, teachers going into their own pockets, not making enough? What are you hearing on the front lines here, and how much do you think, if things don't get addressed, is this problem going to go from bad to worse in more and more school districts around the country?
So let me look, in New York City, when I taught in the 90s, we had conditions like this. But at one point or another, there's a straw that breaks the camel's back. So in West Virginia, it was that we were losing so many teachers to the surrounding states that you didn't have a math teacher, you didn't have a physics teacher. Someone who didn't know how to teach math or physics were trying to do that, and they were doing it on salaries because healthcare costs were rising so much that were not 2018 salaries, but 2011 salaries. And they were working a second and third job. And same in Arizona, and same in Oklahoma. So it was conditions, it was pay, it's become impossible to do the work we want to do with kids. In some places, we've changed that. In New York City, it's not perfect, but there's been more resources put into schools. But we need to do that for all kids in all schools throughout the country.
You know, one thing that I think it surprised a lot of people was usually when employees strike, there's not a lot of sympathy in the general public. But by every metric I saw, people back the teachers in West Virginia and some of the other places. Nobody likes spending tax dollars, but they figure, listen, teachers aren't making a big pile here, and if anybody deserves a raise and also resources for the kids, it's teachers. I wonder how much of a message that was listened to in state capitals, because I know people were surprised they sided with the teachers over the states.
So, you know, I've been doing this work for a long time, and we always find that regular working people, by and large, support their public schools and their teachers. And the closer you get to communities, they see that. What we have had for the last decade or so, though, is that the elite haven't. So you have a disconnect between the elite, who might actually rush to say this particular charter school that they are supporting and they have done a fundraiser for is so great, and they have access to TV or access to radio or access to the editorial writers. But when you actually really talk to people, they want their public schools to thrive. They know that's one of the few things that America gives to level the playing field, to make sure that there's opportunity for all. So I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised in West Virginia. I wasn't surprised in Oklahoma. I haven't been surprised in New York. I wasn't surprised in Arizona. What I was surprised about in LA is just the extent of the public support. 88 out of 10 people supported the public school teachers.
Finally, have you ever seen an education secretary that is so antagonistic to education, more specifically public education?
No. She doesn't meet with teachers. She doesn't engage with teachers. She doesn't believe in public education. She believes in profits over people. She believes in privatization over what we need to do for opportunity for all kids. So no, never seen that.
Well, Randi, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for wanting to cover this. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Coming up next, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's unveiling her Green New Deal, but it fell with a thud among a lot of Democrats, including leadership. Young Turk Cenk Uygur, he is here on that and much more.